Hi, my name is Karina Barbosa, and this is the instructor portion of the copyright assignment where I go over the Assure lesson plan. Okay, so for this, I use the Assure model, so that would be analyze learners, state standards, objectives, select strategies and resources, utilize resources, require learner participation, and evaluate and revise. So starting off with the A, the analyze learners. So going off of some of the general characteristics, they would be digital natives. Um, Meaning that they have grown up with technology, but maybe not formally like taught it in their school, but they have always been surrounded by it. There would be ninth and 10th graders, so that would be about 14 to 16 years old. And I'd be teaching this on a one-to-one technology campus. So that means that these students get laptops given to them by the school district, checked out for that school year, or they have their phones, but at the very least, they are given a district device. The entry competencies. So more than half of students do not have a knowledge of copyright. Um, and if they've have heard of copyright, then there haven't been any formal lessons in copyright. I anticipate that most of them will know like, oh, TM, because like a lot of times I will hear jokes like, oh yeah, they'll say this idea and then be like, TM, but maybe not really understanding what all of the specific guidelines and laws are behind it. Learning differences and needs. So I am at a campus that has predominantly ELL, English language learner students. So many of them have just arrived or are, emerging bilinguals. So I would need to have like a lot of vocabulary being pre-taught. I would like to have like word banks. I'd have word walls up. In the classroom. I would also allow them use of like the resources. We have a lot of like bilingual dictionaries, and many of our programs have like where they can select the word and it will give them a dictionary definition and also a picture dictionary. For our learning styles, so I have this set up in a lecture style, but there's also a lot of collaborative learning and things for the students to like work with as well. So it would be touching on a bunch of different types of learning styles. Um, for any disabilities that the students have, for example, if the students are hearing impaired, there will be um, captions on the videos as well as like a handout so that they could be able to see it visually. If they're visually impaired, the video does have um, audio that they can listen to, and in on the handouts I can make the text much larger, or I can record myself putting out the scenarios for them beforehand. Okay, so that would be the A for analyze learners. For the state standards, so I found that this lesson goes over a couple different ones. So the first one is the Texas School Library Standards, Strand 4, Dimension 6. So that would be the library encourages students to use digital intellectual property responsibly and understand current copyright rules, because that is the main thing we're going to be doing. Make responsible online decisions, understand the significance of a digital identity, and use positive digital citizenship practices. The second one would still be with the Texas School Library Standards. That'd be Strand 1, Dimension 2. So that'd be learners and educators practice the ethical and legal use of information, including transformative fair use, intellectual freedom, information access, privacy, proprietary rights, and validation of information as approval in the local policy EFA, federal law, First Amendment, and best library practice in the Library Bill of Rights. It would also fall under some of the ISTE standards, so that'd be 2C and 3D specifically. So 2C would be demonstrate an understanding of and respect for the rights and obligations of using and sharing intellectual property. And 3D would be build knowledge by actively exploring real-world issues and problems, developing ideas and theories, and pursuing answers and solutions, especially through their activity where they're going to be analyzing real-world situations and applying their knowledge that they've gained of copyright and fair use. And lastly are the AASL standards. So I have 6B2, which is acknowledging authorship and demonstrating respect for the intellectual property of others. and as well as number 6D3, inspiring others to engage in safe, responsible, ethical, and legal information behaviors. This will be primarily, through the lecture as well as through the class discussion and debate. The objective, I have 7 different ones that they can do, but like primarily is that so that students will be introduced to and develop a basic understanding of copyright laws. They'll be able to define the terms copyright, public domain, and fair use, as well as get an idea of like Creative Commons. Students will identify the purpose of the 4 factors of fair use. They'll be able to describe their rights and responsibilities as creators, because it's also they are copyright creators as well. Students can identify examples of copyright infringement and will be able to apply copyright principles to real-world situations. This will be primarily done through their group activity. And students will apply fair use to real-world situations and make a case for or against each scenario. So depending on the scenario they get, they can say like why it is fair use or why it's not. And as long as they have valid reasons using the terminology and concepts they've learned, they are good. So the select strategies and resources. For instructional strategies, I anticipate, so I would have a lecture style to introduce the topic to them. I would want to continue on with a terms and concept quiz. So this, I would anticipate being able to see like what their preliminary understanding is. So this could be done even like at the very beginning of it, right after the lecture style. And then at post lesson, it would take the same quiz to see what all they have learned from the beginning of what is copyright and how to apply the concepts to after what the lesson is. There'd be a whole class discussion and debate. So in this case, the teacher, or really the teacher librarian, will introduce different scenarios for the whole class to discuss, and the students will provide reasoning for whether copyright is followed in each one. Students will also make a case for and against fair use, like in different situations. Is this considered fair use? Is this not considered fair use? Why or why not? And provide reasons for it. And then also to have like a class debate where one side is trying to argue for fair use and the other side is trying to argue against fair use in that specific scenario. So that way we understand the different concepts being applied. And then lastly would be a small group discussion. So students will then discuss specific scenarios that they get in their small groups and present their findings and explanations to each other. So for resources, there need to be a video projection set up, whether that's going to be, with a projector, a smartboard, whatever is available in the library. They would have a video over copyright and fair use for introduction. I would have a handout provided by the instructor. They would have writing utensils, and there needs to be a device for every group. So that could be like the laptop, from them being in the one-to-one campus, or if they're going to use their own phones. Yeah. Utilizing resources. So we're going to be following the 5 Ps. So the first P is previewing the resources. So I would look over the PowerPoint presentation to make sure it's ready for the learners, make sure it's developmentally it's appropriate, that they are getting all the concepts that they need. Also make sure that the video I select is appropriate for the students and meets the learning objectives. And if it's only a small section I need, then I'll make sure that only that small section is being shown and that it is ready right away so I don't have to waste time looking just for that section. It's ready to go. So 2 would be prepare the resources. So that would mean each group has their own handouts, device, and materials needed at their tables all ready for them. That the scenario on the activity sheets students receive have sufficient details and are relevant to the students. And by relevant to the students, I mean it could be something that they know. So for example, it could be over like DJ Earworm, which is a very popular DJ. It could be over like remix trailers that the students have high interest in, or it's something like an example of how they might run into copyright themselves trying to use things for assignments. 3, preparing the environment. So I would have library be set up for groups of 4 students. So it means like the tables are set up for groups of 4 students to work. But they're also like sort of facing the front so that they can easily view the video at the beginning of the presentation and not have to do all this changing from the direct instruction part to the group activity part. The presentation should be ready to go. I mentioned that a little bit beforehand. Devices, laptops should be functioning and charged, and that's really important because as they're, doing stuff in their own small group discussions, if they need to take notes, that those devices are ready for them to use to be able to access resources to find more information. And if they aren't charged, to have chargers ready for them as well. And then lastly, have agenda and lesson objectives written on board. That way they know exactly what to expect out of this lesson. Number 4, prepare the learners. So that would be introducing the topic and learning objectives to students. I'd want to explain the activity sheet and the expectations to the students. So they would need to know that they have to use the terms from the presentation to explain how copyright was either followed or infringed, and also know like the factors of fair use and to see whether it is or is not applicable in the scenario that they've been given. That they need to know to demonstrate their knowledge. And last, provide the learning experience. So the learning experience will occur in the library. Student's teacher will be present. I anticipate wanting to do this as a co-teaching experience, but if that's not possible, then the teacher will be present and will be able to do like a lead and follow type of co-teaching, or a team teaching kind of thing. Students will have access to both print and digital resources, so they'll have their devices to access like digital resources. They'll have the print resources I give them, but plus they'll also be in the library, so I can motion them to the section of the library where they can find more information about copyright. And they'll also have time to try out new terminology and skills learned in the lecture prior to the assignment, and that's what they pre-quiz, but also they can show off their knowledge during the assignment when they're doing the group activities. Require learner participation. During the presentation, students should practice active listening and be taking notes. There will be the handout will have a section for them to be taking notes on. They'll be active listening. We might have to review what that looks like. Eyes forward. We are making sure that our mouths are closed and we are opening our ears. Making sure that they know that this information that they need to have. During the class discussion and debate, students will be expected to make at least one contribution. The contribution can be them speaking up. It could be them, holding up their paper with their answer, but they know that they need to have at least one contribution because they can be called on at any moment. During the small group discussion, students will be working in the groups of 3 to 4. So I said 4, but in case students are absent or the numbers don't work out, 3 to 4. They will do their scenario. Each scenario will be different, and they will need to present their findings afterwards to their group members. And if there is time after all of this is done, each group will be able to present their scenarios as well to the whole class. And librarians will be questioning and doing informal assessment throughout the duration of the lesson. So that will be something that will require the learner participation. And then for evaluate and revise, this is the rubric I came up with. So it goes over like the copyright vocabulary, the student understanding the majority of the copyright terms and vocabulary on that quiz, on the pre one, and also the post-lesson quiz. Students will be able to explain the concept of fair use in 3 sentences in order to get the full 5 points. With Creative Commons, we're going to be going over the different types of licenses. They can explain those. They can explain those attributes, or they can explain some of them. And then the copyright and fair use scenario. So that would be they can give at least 5 concrete reasons for their position, and they are able to show that they can apply copyright and fair use principles. I don't really have a chance to revise this, but one thing I can see possibly happening is students needing to revise the vocabulary and the concepts more than just this one time, and if maybe possibly even breaking this up into 2 different lessons, focusing on just copyright versus just fair use versus just Creative Commons. But I feel like a good overview lesson would be good first, but I would really like to see how this plays out in an actual class. Thank you for your time. This has been the Sure lesson plan model.